The cold that night wasn't normal. It wasn't the kind of chill you expect in the mountains or the kind that creeps through your jacket. No, this felt personal, like the wind itself was angry at me. I had driven up to a remote winter cabin in northern Vermont to escape the chaos of my life in Boston. The plan was simple: disconnect for a week, no phone, no work, just snow and silence. The cabin belonged to a co-worker's uncle who had passed away years ago. It was barely maintained, still filled with old furniture and an eerie amount of family photos, most of them slightly faded, staring down at me with clouded eyes. But it was isolated, and that's what I needed, or thought I needed. The first day was peaceful. I chopped some firewood, made hot cocoa, read an old paperback I found on the shelf. But by the second night, something felt wrong. It started with sounds, not the usual creaks and groans of a wooden cabin, but deliberate noises, scraping under the floorboards, whisper-like rustling, just outside the window. I convinced myself it was wind, until I saw the footprints, perfect, detailed, barefoot prints in the snow, leading from the edge of the forest to the cabin door. I hadn't stepped outside since before sunset, and they weren't mine. I stood inside, holding my breath, staring out the frosted window. The snow was untouched beyond the prints. No drag marks, no animal tracks, just a straight line of human prints leading right to my front step, and stopping, not turning around, not walking back, just stopping. I opened the door slowly, my flashlight catching the thick white powder, confirming what I feared. The prints stopped at the door. Whoever made them never walked away. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and stoked the fire like it could protect me. That night, the power flickered and died. I lit every candle I could find, but the shadows in that place moved like they had minds of their own. I tried to sleep, wrapped in 3 blankets, my back to the wall. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, the scraping. But now it was inside, not loud, just enough to freeze me in place. I sat up slowly and listened. It came from the attic. I hadn't even noticed there was an attic door in the ceiling near the kitchen, a pull-string hatch I never dared to touch. But now, the door was slightly open. I grabbed the fire poker and walked toward the kitchen. The air was colder there. I could see my breath. The hatch door hung open maybe 6 inches. A soft creaking echoed from above, like someone shifting their weight. I stood under it for a long time, fire poker in hand, debating if I should pull it down. I didn't have to. The string moved on its own, slowly unwinding until the door dropped open with a soft thud. A wooden ladder extended down. Nothing came out. I backed away, step by step, until I reached the living room. Then I heard the whisper. A woman's voice, barely audible. "You shouldn't be here." I turned and saw no one, just candlelight flickering wildly as if the air had shifted. I turned back toward the attic, and something looked down at me. Just a glimpse, a pale face upside down, staring at me from the darkness above. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My body locked up, heart punching my ribs. I ran for the front door, fumbled with the lock, yanked it open, and ran into the snow barefoot. The cold tore at my skin, but I didn't care. I turned to look back. The attic door still hung open, but now the figure was gone. I ran to my car, turned the key. Nothing. Dead. The battery was fine earlier. I sat there, shivering, staring at the cabin, and then I saw her, standing in the upstairs window behind the glass, pale, thin, long black hair hanging like wet seaweed. Her head tilted, watching me. I spent the night in the car, engine off, wrapped in the emergency blanket. I didn't sleep. By morning, the tracks were gone. No signs in the snow. Just a perfectly still cabin. I went back in to grab my bag and get out. The attic door was closed. No candles remained. No signs anything had happened. But on the kitchen table sat a photograph that wasn't there before. It was old, faded. A family in front of the cabin. Man, woman, child. And standing in the attic window behind them, the same pale woman. When I asked my co-worker about it, he got quiet. Said his uncle went crazy up there. Claimed someone lived in the attic, that she only came out during snowstorms. They found him one spring, frozen stiff in the kitchen, attic door open. Nobody believed him. I do now. Some places aren't meant for solitude, because when you're truly alone, you might hear what the silence is hiding. It was supposed to be a peaceful solo retreat, a weekend away from the constant noise of city life, tucked deep in the snowy wilderness of Colorado. My job as a copywriter gave me the freedom to work remotely, so I booked a small winter cabin I found through a private listing. It wasn't on any of the major rental apps, just a quiet post on an obscure website, almost too hidden to find unless you were really looking. The photos looked charming. Snow-covered roof, chimney, bare pine trees all around. The ad described it as a perfect winter solitude escape. It even had a fireplace. That was the hook. I was exhausted from deadlines, insomnia, and my apartment neighbors who never seemed to sleep. So I packed up my laptop, groceries for a few days, and my dog, Miller, and made the drive. The listing had only one odd instruction: don't disturb the snow around the side window. I didn't think much of it, just some preservationist weirdo trying to protect their landscaping. The road up was more remote than expected. GPS lost signal for a solid hour, and I had to rely on printed directions. But I finally reached the place, exactly like the photos. Quaint, beautiful, completely isolated. No cell signal, of course, just the cabin, the snow, and the silence. I settled in fast, made a fire, fed Miller, set up my workspace by the big front window. The interior was cozy but rustic. There was a strange antique mirror above the fireplace with carvings I didn't recognize. I ignored it. First night was uneventful. Snow fell thick outside, and Miller curled up near the fire while I typed away. But in the middle of the night, he started growling. Not barking, just low, constant growling, pointed toward the side window, the one the ad told me not to disturb. I got up and peeked through the frosted glass. Just trees and snow. Nothing unusual. Maybe a deer. I told Miller to settle down, but even after I went back to bed, I heard him pacing, scratching at the door. Not the front door, the one that led to the small pantry near the side window. The next morning I checked outside. There were footprints in the snow, but not mine. These were barefoot, human, leading from the woods to the side of the cabin. And then, gone. No return trail, no scattering. Just a straight line of prints to the window and nothing else. I looked around. Nobody in sight. I took a few photos for proof, then tried to shake it off. Probably kids playing some twisted joke. That night, the mirror above the fireplace fogged over, like it was breathing. I cleaned it with my sleeve. It fogged again 5 minutes later. Miller wouldn't leave my side. The second night, something changed. I was writing late when Miller suddenly ran to the pantry door and started barking like mad. I followed him, opened the door, and felt a blast of cold air. There was a crawl space under the pantry I hadn't noticed before, a wooden trapdoor covered by a rug. It was open. My heart dropped. I knew I hadn't touched it. I peered down, but it was pitch black. I shined my phone light but saw nothing. I slammed it shut, locked the pantry door, and decided to sleep upstairs in the loft with Miller. Sometime after 2 a.m., I heard something dragging across the wooden floor below. A long, drawn-out scrape, like nails on wood. Then silence, then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving through the living room. Miller whimpered and buried himself under the covers. I held my breath, listening, trying not to move. The steps stopped at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't dare look. I didn't sleep, not 1 second. At sunrise, I found nothing downstairs. But the mirror had cracked, one thin fracture running diagonally across its face. It hadn't fallen. Nothing had hit it. It was just broken. I looked at the photos I'd taken the day before, the ones of the footprints outside. They were gone. Not deleted, just replaced with static. Digital snow. I decided I'd had enough. I packed up everything, shoved Miller into the car, and got ready to leave. But the car wouldn't start. Battery dead. The nearest help was hours away, and there was no cell service. I went back inside to make coffee and wait until I could flag someone down. When I entered the kitchen, there were wet footprints, bare feet, leading from the pantry to the living room. They were fresh, still melting. That night, I built a fire and sat with Miller wrapped in blankets. Every few minutes, I checked the mirror. At one point, it fogged again, but this time, a handprint appeared in the condensation. Then another. Then 2 long streaks, as if fingers were dragging down the glass from inside. I screamed, knocked the mirror off the wall, and it shattered across the floor. Behind it was nothing. Just cabin wall. But something about the sound of the shattering made me freeze. It echoed wrong, like it went somewhere deeper, like something had been waiting. The snowstorm hit hard that night. I didn't sleep. I just waited for morning, counting every sound. At on. Snow had started falling hard by late afternoon, blanketing everything in a thick white sheet. I had driven 6 hours upstate to my brother Caleb's winter cabin, a place he'd always said helped him clear his head. He'd invited me up for a weekend of disconnecting. No Wi-Fi, no phones, just firewood, whiskey, and stories. I hadn't seen him in months, and truth be told, I needed the break. Work had been eating me alive. But when I arrived, the cabin looked abandoned. No footprints in the snow. No smoke from the chimney. His truck was parked on the side but layered in ice, like it hadn't been touched in days. I knocked on the cabin door, and when it creaked open on its own, I figured he'd just stepped out or maybe dozed off without locking it. The inside was warm, the fireplace lit and crackling, logs stacked neatly beside it. A pot of coffee steamed on the stove, but the cabin was silent. "Caleb?" I called out. No answer. I explored the rooms, but he was nowhere. His stuff was there, his boots, coat, even his wallet and keys. The bathroom mirror was fogged like someone had just showered. But no sign of Caleb. I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The sun dipped, and the storm outside grew vicious. Snow piled against the windows. My cell had no signal. I stoked the fire, made coffee, and waited longer. Still nothing. Then that night, I heard footsteps crunching outside. I rushed to the door and opened it to find nothing but an endless white void. I thought maybe Caleb had gone hiking and got caught in the snow. But why leave in the middle of a storm? I turned on the porch light, and that's when I saw the footprints. Bare footprints. Human. Leading away from the porch and into the woods. I grabbed a flashlight and followed them until they abruptly stopped. No turn, no change in direction. They just ended. And the forest around me was dead silent. I shouted his name again. My voice echoed too loudly. When I got back inside, I found something that hadn't been there before. A notebook sitting on the kitchen table. I recognized Caleb's handwriting. The latest entry read, "It watches me when the snow falls. It likes the cold. I think it's wearing my face now." My stomach twisted. I flipped through the pages. Most of them were paranoid scribbles, drawings of something humanoid with a distorted smile, skin stretched too tightly across the skull. The more I read, the more terrified I became. There were entries dated for every night over the past week. But the weird part, the handwriting grew shakier, more erratic, like Caleb was losing his mind. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the front door slowly creaking open. I grabbed the fire poker and crept out of bed. Someone was standing by the fireplace. The firelight flickered off their silhouette. It looked like Caleb. "Caleb," I whispered. He turned, but his eyes were wrong. They didn't blink, just glassy and wide. He smiled too long, too wide. His skin had this frozen pale shimmer, like ice had replaced the blood under his skin. I stepped back, my instincts screaming, "Where the hell have you been?" He didn't answer, just stared. Then he spoke in Caleb's voice, but it sounded off, like an echo trying to mimic a real sound. "You shouldn't have come here." I bolted out the back door and ran into the woods with just my coat and boots. Snow was knee-deep. The cold bit hard. I didn't care. I couldn't go back in there. Not with whatever that thing was. I made it to the ranger outpost by dawn. They took me seriously after I broke down and showed them the notebook. A search team went out to the cabin. They found it just as I left it. Except Caleb was gone. Again. But here's the part that haunts me. One ranger said the cabin looked undisturbed. No signs anyone had used the fire or coffee pot in days. Like no one had been there at all. They said Caleb died 2 weeks before I arrived. Exposure. Found deep in the woods, frozen, with a smile stretched ear to ear. The last page of that notebook? It was dated the night I arrived. Moral lesson. Some places don't forget death. And some spirits, they learn how to wear your skin just well enough to welcome someone else in.